Hello, friends and subscribers. It is I, the Black Lord of Fenrir, and I'm kind of annoyed. So sorry if this video comes off more of a sloppy rant than a master-crafted rebuttal, as I am still working on my Phantasm reviews, which are on their way. Long-time viewers know this, but I have left some rather obvious hints in my videos that I am a huge fan of Warhammer 40,000, both the tabletop game and the Dawn of War series, and a few of the other Warhammer computer games. I have been into the game since I was about 12 years old, and I have also read some of the novels too. But as one can tell by the title of this video, a plague worse than anything Nurgle could ever conjure has tried to get its filthy fingers into my precious Warhammer 40k. Feminists and social justice warriors. Just the other day, Sargon of Akkad on his Thinkery channel had Arch Warhammer on a live stream discussing, the recent SJW attacks on Warhammer. So I, as an avid player, felt I should probably come forth with my own 2 cents on this. Now, one might be scratching their heads why SJWs and feminists are even bothering targeting something as uncommon as Warhammer, considering that Warhammer is yet another one of those things most people have never heard of, never mind actively immerse themselves in. Well, to that I say I'm not surprised in the least, actually, and this is for a number of reasons. The first reason is that these SJWs and feminists have a very seditious agenda similar to that of the Christian right. They seek massive-scale social engineering to reshape society into how they see fit. As cultural Marxists, they seek to subvert any culture they deemed problematic into something befitting to their ideology. To put it simple, if they don't like it, it's inherently toxic and needs to change to their standards. And hear it from the horse's mouth.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Everything is racist and everything is sexist, and that of course includes Warhammer 40,000 and its fanbase, which leads into the second reason. Since 2012, and possibly sooner, the gamer culture was the primary target of the SJWs, with Anita Sarkeesian's That Woman versus Tropes series decrying video games as reinforcing negative stereotypes towards women and reinforcing what they consider toxic attitudes and norms embraced by men. Since about 2014, with the advent of Gamergate, the SJWs more than anything have made the general nerd culture their primary target for being the catalyst for their social re-engineering. And as we know, with Warhammer being a fully fledged and immersed sci-fi universe whose depth is equal to that of Star Wars, Star Trek, Mass Effect, Halo, etc., Warhammer 40,000 is ripe for nerddom. As for it being not very well known by the general public, one should note that Warhammer 40,000 is still the world's top-selling tabletop war game, and it's been around for 30 years now, since 1987. So once they infect Warhammer 40k, they'll infect others as well, whether it be War Machine or Flames of War. In one of Arch Warhammer's videos, they detailed, to my knowledge, the first account of a feminist noticing Warhammer 40,000, which was dated back to January of 2016, so almost 2 years ago. He details an article written in the Mary Sue, go figure, written by James McConaughey entitled, "In the Grim Darkness of Warhammer 40,000's Future, There Are Only Men, and It's Terrible." Terrible. First of all, that's not true. And when I think of terrible, I think of mass shootings and 3-year-olds dying of cancer, not a fictional universe comprised only of men. But I digress. But for a while, most of us ignored these critiques as they were little. I mean, yeah, Arch did do videos on other stupid articles done by feminists on the 40k universe, mostly for the lulz, because, they're wrong. But to my theory, what really made the feminists and SJW types really catch wind of 40k were the certain memes spread around during the election time last year. You know the ones. The God Emperor Trump memes. The joke that Donald Trump is the God Emperor of mankind. The central figure to the Warhammer 40,000 universe who united mankind all across the galaxy with technological progress and conquest against hostile alien races to ultimately combat the powers of chaos. Anyway, these memes spread like wildfire on social media. I myself was pretty amused by them, but did find it kind of annoying that that's how now most people know about 40k was through an election meme. But yeah, after that whole escapade, that same asshole penned an article entitled, Why are there so many fascists in the 40k fandom? Well, as someone who's been in the fandom for nearly 12 years now, I must say I've never met any fascists who played 40k. But then again, when I and most other people play with someone, we don't inquire about their political views. Why? Because who gives a shit if you're playing a fucking game? But yeah, clearly I must have missed the day at my local hobby shop when we invited the clan and Aryan nations to play 40k with us. Although, to be fair, to my memory, I might have remembered finding a 40k thread on Stormfront. Unless that's just a false memory. But here's the thing, we might not have had to invite them because perhaps they were all unwittingly there. Because, as we all know, these SJW types really hate Trump. Like, really, really hate Donald Trump. And what do they hate as much as Trump, if not more? People who voted for him or support him. Because to them, only a literal alt-right neo-Nazi who wants to put Muslims, Hispanics, and the LGBT crowd into concentration camps would vote for Donald Trump. Never mind call him God Emperor. But yeah, a lot of these articles had some really stupid arguments or attempts at arguments. Sargon and Arch did a pretty good takedown of them in their stream and then the separate videos. But there were some points I'd like to add before going on to make my own points about the SJW's main points of contention with Warhammer 40,000. The dumbest article was called Games Workshop and Me on Representation. By that title, you know where this shit is going. Because SJWs use the pretense of, is there enough representation, to stick their big noses into fandoms that they aren't even remotely interested in. But being the moral busybodies they are, need to lecture other people on the terms of their fiction. But ever notice that SJWs paradoxically will deny that there are different races of humans, and there's no real difference between black people and white people, but then proceed to complain that they don't see enough brown or black faces in this game or that TV show? Why does it fucking matter if there's no differences between blacks and whites? But anyway, let's look at some of the highlights from this article. Before I dig into this, I must lay my cards down on the table, or show my dice. I am a white, middle-class British male. I have never suffered through not being represented. I can therefore only imagine what it must be like to not see yourself reflected in the media and pop culture of the day. Well, that's only natural when you live in a white majority country and you're white. But hey, why don't you try living in Japan for a year, or India, or the Congo? You won't see much white middle-class Brits on their television or in their pop culture. Then you'll quote-unquote suffer not being represented. And listen to this rhetoric. Suffer. Just like people suffer from being in poverty or losing a loved one. People really suffer when they don't see people who superficially look like them. Let's see. Is there enough representation of minority groups in Warhammer 40k? Short answer, no. Well, my counter question is, what is considered enough to you? And secondly, if we look on a global human scale, white Europeans are a minority who make up anywhere between 5 to 10% of the world's population. Of course, that would mean whites are overrepresented in the humans of Warhammer 40,000, but again, he means that there's not enough non-whites, and as he goes on. There's nothing drawing from African, Japanese, or Hispanic references, and the People's Army from China, the largest army in the world, has no representation. Not only is he cherry-picking, he's just plain wrong. While not African, there are black people in 40k. The Salamanders are a black space marine chapter, and if you look at the Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War games, we have Inquisitor Toth, who is black, and his accent is so delicious I could listen to it all day.
I merely fear that you might see chaos, but it does not exist. I ask that as a loyal subject of the Emperor, you serve the Imperium's interest before your own agenda.
As for Hispanics, considering that Warhammer 40,000 and its parent company Games Workshop is based in your country, the United Kingdom, you and the rest of Europe don't get much immigration from countries south of the US's border with Mexico. I know you can see that point in your article, but one has to ask, how does one make up a Hispanic human in 40k? Make him brown? But then how do we know he's Hispanic? Do we give him a Spanish-sounding name like Esteban Martinez or something? But since names are a cultural thing, how do we know Hispanic culture and the Spanish language would survive 40,000 years into the future? Because remember, Planet Earth has been terraformed in the Warhammer 40k universe. The countries we know no longer exist. I mean, look at the names people had back in ancient Egypt. You don't see their language and names still floating around. Ah, but of course, certain space marines are based off of certain cultures and have names from those cultures. But if you want a space marine chapter based off the Aztecs, who aren't even Latino but are indigenous, you'd probably have to make them a first founding. But you can't do that because that would be retconning. And do not get me started on retconning. It's already bad enough we had to deal with a certain asshole, as he who shall not be named, fucking with our lore for the worse, merely because his revisions are shit. Which boiled our blood enough as it was. But now retconning, for the sake of appeasing people who don't give a shit about 40k, its lore or gaming, then oh man. So help us God, Emperor, there is not one torture method conceived in Kamora that would be sufficient enough to satisfy our wrath on the poor fools who decided to go through with that. Anyway, but notice he specifically mentions the Japanese and Chinese instead of Asians in general, because he would be fucking wrong. The White Scars with their Primarch, Jakate Khan, are based off the Mongols. You know, the nomads who look like Chinese and Japanese people, and they once had the largest empire spanning the earth, stretching from Korea to Belarus. I know he is mainly focusing on the humans of 40k, but there's a diverse range of color. Humans are anywhere from white to black. Orcs are green, the Tau are blue-gray, the Dark Eldar are albino white, and the Necrons are friggin' robots, and Chaos Demons and Tyranids are every color under the sun. But look at this image. The humans of 40k, many uniforms, one skin shade. But note how the image shows the Talahan Desert Riders, who are based off of Arabs, you know, brown people. But hey, I guess they're not brown enough. And if you thought that was rich, get a load of this. Remember the Salamanders, the all-black Space Marine chapter? Well, that's not good enough. Well, that's true. According to 40k Lexicanum, as a result of reaction between their genetics and the high levels of radiation on Nocturne, Salamander Battle Brothers have dark or jet black skin and bright burning eyes. That's right, the only dark-skinned Space Marines are that way due to radiation poisoning. And their eyes glow like demons. Welcome to the hobby, people. You see what he did there? That's called moving the goalposts. He first complains that there's little to no non-white humans, but then when presented with an example of black Space Marines, it's still not good enough because of why they're black. Also, radiation poisoning? Yeah, see also how humans got dark skin in the first place. Do you even science, bro? When I go outside and stay in the sun for a tan, I get tanner, and people gradually get darker skin over generations due to the ultraviolet radiation interacting with the melanin in their skin. So what's the problem? Did it happen too quickly for you? But, it's just a game. Yeah, this is true, it's just a game, but it misses the point that the game should be for everyone. Nobody should feel excluded, either through the game's makeup or the attitudes of its players. The game already is for everyone! And you're right, no one should feel excluded, but that's their fucking problem. If someone feels excluded because there's not enough people that look like them in the lore or the quote-unquote game's makeup, well then that's too fucking bad. You're fucking weak if that's the case. As for the attitudes of its players, pretty much every hobby shop I can think of that hosts Warhammer events have codes of conduct that are to the tune of, have fun with everyone and don't be a dick. That's about as welcoming as it gets, and if that's not good enough, again, too fucking bad, not our problem. Another point he has, it's already diverse, you can paint the figures any color you like. This seems to be willfully missing the point. Yes, you can paint the miniatures any color you like, but that doesn't make them representative of people of color. If you paint an orange blue, it's still an orange. You could faithfully represent the skin tones of the Han Chinese, Shan tribesmen, or the Singalese Wolof. But that is only part of the story. None of these models are sculpted to look like these groups. And ethnicity is an awful lot more than skin color. You know the phrase, comparing apples to oranges? He just compared models to oranges. Oh, God. And secondly, most Space Marines are covered head to toe in power armor anyway. You're not going to see them. As for the Guard, yeah, their faces are pretty bland and featureless. So I guess maybe they did that on purpose so people could make them whatever race or ethnicity they wanted. It's grim dark. Get over it. An excuse for generally being insulting and or misogynistic. Blah 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 blah. The game is grim dark. It's also fiction. We, the players, live in the real world. Whilst being contemptuous of women and people different from you may be acceptable in the Warhammer world, on Earth it's time we moved beyond that. It's sort of like how it wouldn't be okay for me to power my fridge using the dying embers of your life force, even though the Imperium does that with its dreadnoughts. First of all, in the Imperium there is no sexism, racism, or patriarchy. Women are treated equally and so are non-whites. Humanity is generally united in the Imperium, and it's xenophobic towards the Xenos and alien races. And secondly, even if that was the case, what the fuck are you insinuating? That 40k players are more likely to be assholes to women and non-whites under the pretense that the lore is grim dark? If so, citation needed. You only gave one antecedent. What would increased diversity mean? New storylines, new miniature ranges, an increased pool of players to play against. With new markets in which Games Workshop can sell its products. Done properly, increasing diversity is a win-win for everybody. It's great for the creators, great for the players, and for those on the outside looking in. No, it wouldn't. You have no fucking proof that would be the case. As Arch and Sargon mentioned, 40k is a very expensive hobby. The deciding factor for most people who get into 40k is not whether they see enough people who look like them, it's about the money. If you want just a small army to at least get started with, that's like 500 points. Again, it depends on what army you're going with, but you're still looking at least well over $200. And that's not even counting the paint, glue, brushes, and other tools you'll need to paint and assemble the armies. People spend thousands of dollars on their armies. Granted, over years, but still. At least in the United States, blacks and Latinos are generally a low-income demographic. Very unlikely to start an expensive hobby like Warhammer. You can add more non-white human characters and introduce new non-white Space Marine chapters or Imperial Guard regiments, but I really doubt you're going to see a change in the demographics of people playing the game. Or even if you did, it wouldn't be that significantly different. Must the game include people of color in order to appeal to them? The idea that the game must contain people of color to be interesting to them is potentially patronizing, but it's not difficult to see that having no representation in the hobby is unlikely to invite them in. It could be argued that there's lots of white fans of manga and anime, popular culture phenomenon in which there is little or no Western representation. This lack of representation is not a barrier for white people to enjoy the media. I think there's an important difference. White Westerners have not suffered through generations of being told, "No, this isn't for you." Well, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? Who is telling non-white people certain things aren't for them? It's also amusing he brings up white people enjoying anime might be a false equivalence, but what about the non-whites who enjoy anime without representation? I've been to anime conventions in the past. It's a pretty diverse crowd. In fact, I remember the first time I went to one, I wore my Darkthrone shirt, not expecting anyone to recognize it, but 2 out of the 3 people who did were non-whites. One looked like he was half black, one was Latino, and the one white person who did was cosplaying, of all things, as Jesus. I mean, wow. But anyway, I tend to notice a lot of black people like Dragon Ball Z. Seriously, when I'm out wearing my DBZ shirt in public, most of the people who tell me, "Hey, nice shirt," are black dudes. So it's also worth mentioning that DBZ has even less black people than Warhammer 40,000. Your argument is invalid. But keep in mind, their whole excuse for busybodying Warhammer 40,000 or certain video games or anything like that all centers around the concept of representation. The Feminist 40k page that Arch and Sargon articulated made the case for this, calling for female Space Marines, but which we're not really going to get into. But some of their wishes are reasonable. More female miniatures or conversion kits for Imperial Guard would be fine, as well as new plastic Sisters of Battle models. And of course, the non-sexualized representation of Imperial soldiers. Yeah, because the Adeptus Sororitas are so sexualized. But also, why are you so hung up on humans? The other races have plenty of females. And not just playable models, but full-fledged characters. One of my favorites from my army is Lilith Hesperax. You know, when most people think of 40k characters, they think of Space Marines and other characters clad in heavy body armor meant to shrug off stuff that would normally take out a tank, and they're armed with big guns that are stupidly overpowered. But Lilith isn't anything like that. For one, she's a woman. She's not even human, she's a Dark Eldar. She wears only a few scraps of armor, sports bra, and a thong, and is armed with only 2 blades that are nothing special except they're really sharp. And yet she is more than a match for most things in the 40k universe, taking them all out with relative ease, as she moves fast enough to dodge bullets and goes for the weak spots in her opponent's armor. It is for this reason she's considered the Dark Eldar's most efficient killer and Kamara's most prized possession, even stated by Azrael Vecht himself, the overlord of the Dark Eldar. In short, Lilith has accomplished more than most of the male characters in the 40k universe in this regard. Most of them need special armor and special weapons to be tough, but she only needs enough clothing to cover her private areas and 2 knives. Oh, but of course she's not wearing much clothing, therefore she's too sexualized, and is there only to be objectified by knuckle-dragging, basement-dwelling neckbeards, not serve as a symbol of female empowerment. It also probably doesn't help the fact that she's evil, but whatever, she's more badass than most. Seriously, I've never had more fun in 40k than setting my Lilith Hesperax on my friend's bloodletters, and one time my other friend's Tau Fire Warriors by herself. And speaking of the Tau, if Lilith is too sexy for you, how about Commander Shadow Sun? She's a female, and she's leading the Tau's 3rd phase of expansion. Imagine that, a woman being the top military commander for a 40k faction, leading some rather successful military campaigns against the Imperium, but now she's pretty much the de facto leader of the Tau Empire after Anva, the spiritual leader and official head of state, was assassinated. What's wrong with her? She's cool, competent, and fully clothed, or armored, I should say. Well, what's the matter? She's not human-looking enough? I guess looks do matter after all. I guess I'll wrap it up. Could the 40k universe and fandom have more females and non-whites? Yeah, sure. If we could be painfully honest, the 40k fandom is a fucking sausage fest, folks. In all the time I've played 40k, I've only encountered 2, maybe 4 girls that were into it. And then, obviously, countless amounts of guys. As for race, at least here in the States, where I live, it's fairly diverse. But back to the income thing, most of the non-whites I meet playing 40k are mostly East Asians or are Indian. I met one Arab man and his 2 sons that were into it, and I came across maybe a few Latinos, 2 black guys, and like 1 Native American who was into it. I, like most other people, don't have a problem if there were more women and non-whites playing 40k. Most of us would, yeah, we'd welcome it. We think it would be great. But what we do have a problem with is that SJWs and these feminist busybodies are sticking their fucking noses into our fandom, lecturing us on how we need to change to better suit them. Seriously, the Feminist 40k page complains about the lore, the models, and the overall player culture. As someone in the comments on one of Arch Warhammer's videos said, they put it very well. Well, if you have a problem with the lores, models, and fandom, and pretty much everything else that makes up Warhammer, then find another fucking game to play and leave us the hell alone. Oh, but they can't do that because they know deep down, they know that if someone were to make a tabletop game or television show or video game that espouses their social justice crap, no one but them would get into it, and it would fail faster than New Coke did. So that's why they have to latch on to already existing ones, because those will be the catalyst for social reengineering rather than making new ones. But yeah, I had to come out with this video. Sorry if it's a little ranty, but again, time, folks. And I didn't even get to touch upon the gay or trans sides of the arguments. But worry not, I will link the stream and Arch's other videos in the description so you guys can check them out. They're pretty good. So yeah, leave your thoughts, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for the Phantasmathon.